Welcome to a new episode of the Guru's Perspective. And today I wanted to discuss a lot of things that's been going around in the NFL right now. And my phone has been ringing, and I've been getting like different people texting and trying to see what was going on and what's happening in the NFL before the trade deadline. We have until 4 p.m. today before everything is done and settled, but it's been pretty interesting today. And I've just been looking at the phone right now and just seeing all these, things flashing across my screen and getting all this news. I was a little overwhelmed. So yeah, I just wanted to kick off the show and say, first and foremost, congratulations to my team, the Detroit Lions. Was very happy to see what they did today. Definitely looked into that, and they were saying that we were supposed to get Zadarius Smith yesterday, but then I think because of a lot of things as far as tampering or what have you, I just don't really think that they was able to get a really deal set in stone before they made the move. But yeah, the Detroit Lions has officially acquired defensive lineman Zadarius Smith from the Browns on Tuesday. The Lions acquired Zadarius Smith, the pass rusher that they needed this year after, Aiden Hutchinson went down in the Dallas Cowboys game, unfortunately. And we get a 2026 seventh round pick. The Browns acquired a 2025 fifth round pick and a 2026 sixth round pick. We all knew that he was coming to the Lions. We were just trying to figure out when it was going to materialize. And the news was broke earlier this morning that he was coming to us finally. And we're just really glad to get that news. On the other hand, Cincinnati Bengals was having issues with their running backs. I feel like definitely after Joe Mixon, we know that that was one of the worst things that happened, that they got rid of him because they didn't really have a good, depth behind him. No disrespect to Chase Brown. I think he's a phenomenal running back. And Zach Moss, he had flashes, but he's normally injured. In this case, to get more depth over there, the Bengals traded for the Bears running back Khalil Herbert. Cincinnati has given up a seventh round pick in 2025 for Herbert. And basically, I felt like they needed him for depth. And if they're going to make a playoff run, they're 4-5 right now, and they're definitely trending in the right direction. And sometimes they get these slow starts, but just really surprised that it was really slow this year. But all in all, they're only one game under 500, and they still have the chance to try to make a deep playoff run. So I feel like that was one of the things that they need to address, and I'm going to figure out what's going on next with that team. And now I wanted to talk about the kid from the New York Giants, the edge rusher Azeez Ojulari. Right now, people have been calling about him and trying to get a trade offer for him, but I just feel like New York wants too much for him, and that's the reason why he stayed put right now. I understand that they want a decent amount for him. I believe he's 24 years old, was a second round pick, but then they have a lot of depth over there too. They got Thibodeau, and not only do they have him, they already have Brian Burns that they acquired, they got last year, around the time free agency came around. So you have those two guys. And then I feel like Azeez Ojulari is definitely an expandable piece, but they ended up keeping him right now. I don't know. We still have till 4 p.m. So I want to see what materializes in that deal as well. The Panthers were talking about moving on from Miles Sanders, so I want to see what happens with that deal. Right now, I feel like they look at it like Hubbard right now is pretty much what they needed over there. Chuba Hubbard's doing really good, and I feel like Miles Sanders was definitely expandable, but they're trying to check around. I don't know if anything will materialize after, Khalil Herbert going over to the Cincinnati Bengals. So I feel like that was just a misfortune. And then we heard the breaking news today that Dak Prescott is going to be out. And not only is he going to be out, he's going to be out for at least 4 games now. So they have him on the IR list. And moving on, I was really surprised too that the Dallas Cowboys made this deal, but they said they were all in this year and they didn't really get anybody. We felt like that they should have acquired or went after Derrick Henry because he works out and train on the off season in the Dallas area. So just was really surprised that they didn't make a move there since they said they were all in. I think they were all in on getting Dak Prescott to come back, and not only that, but to keep CeeDee Lamb at bay. And it's really sad to me because when I see that they didn't really do much, yeah, they kept their own people, but then they knew that they needed a run game and they didn't address that. So now they're trying to address some issues that I really didn't feel like really needed to be addressed. The Dallas Cowboys traded for the Panthers wide receiver Jonathan Mingo, and Dallas will give up a 2025 fourth round pick and get back Mingo and a 2025 seventh round pick from Carolina. So I believe they just wanted to, try to make a move, and it's not even really a splash. But then, I still don't really feel like it's going to do anything, and it's not going to impact the Dallas Cowboys season this year because, unfortunately, no disrespect to them, I'm not really sure how deep of a playoff run they'll make or if they make a playoff run in general. And I was hearing news too that the Tennessee Titans have received interest from a trade for edge Arden Key and defensive lineman Sebastian Joseph Day. And I was also hearing news that nothing has materialized and it's early, but it still might be something there to keep your eye on. So I definitely will attend to that. The Bills have released safety Mike Edwards. I believe that was a request. He was a healthy scratch most of the season, formerly known as one of the pieces that helped the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win their Super Bowl. And he went over to the Kansas City Chiefs. And now, once he went to the Bills, he's been a healthy scratch for most of the season. So it was time for them to make that move. And I felt like it was the right move for their organization. The big splash that just happened recently, according to Ian Rappaport, was the Saints traded cornerback Marshawn Lattimore to the Commanders. The talks heated up with Washington, and we really felt like this was going to be a piece that goes over to Kansas City, but nothing has materialized. And once that happened, I know that the Washington Commanders was looking heavily for a cornerback because, unfortunately, right now Forbes is going to be one of the pieces that they moved. Emmanuel Forbes, that is one of their former draft picks. I feel like the new regime didn't really have nothing to do with him, and they looked at it like it was the old regime that they had in Washington, and now they have a new regime over there, and they wanted to start off fresh. And I believe they just wanted to get some of the old guys out of there, like Emmanuel Forbes. I don't really feel like he's been really having a good time the last couple of years that he's been playing in the NFL, and he hasn't been what they wanted from him. So, yeah, I definitely could see them moving on from him right now. But other than that, it hasn't really been too much else that happened. And so I'm just looking right now to see if there's any more buzz that's going on. I just been checking around and seeing there's been some really good news and haven't really seen too many people available that came off the board yet. But then we still have a nice amount of time. You know, we have 2 hours and 45 minutes left to see what's going to go on in free agency. But other than that, I want to talk about some of the things too that's going on around the NFL. Some of the coaches that are on a hot seat, and some who have previously been fired as well. We all knew about the New York Jets coach Robert Saleh. He's been released, and now he's over with the Green Bay Packers, and he's been helping as far as their defensive coordinator. I believe he's just been one of the consultants right now after he left the building from the New York Jets. Dennis Allen from the Saints has been fired just recently as well, previously. And they fired him because at first they had a really good season, scoring over 90 points the first 2 games when they were 2-0, and then they dropped the last 7 games. And I believe the Achilles heel that made them more or less consider moving on from him right now was the fact that not only did they lose, they lost to the Carolina Panthers. And no disrespect, but Carolina Panthers for the most part. I only had them winning maybe 1 or 2 games, but when you look at it, you went from 2-0, scoring 90 points in the first 2 games, to losing 7 straight and to lose to the Carolina Panthers. It was time for them to move on. And it's crazy, too, because the stats show that both times when Dennis Allen got fired, when he got fired from the Raiders and when he get fired from the Saints, that Derek Carr was his quarterback. So that speaks volumes. And I want to talk about the other people now, because he was number one on my hot seat as of now when I'm just remade it. And now he's no longer with the New Orleans Saints. I believe Brian Daboll is one of the coaches too, when I look at the coaches in the hot seat, and he's hanging on by a thread right now. I believe Kevin Stefanski's seat is on fire too, as well. As bad as they played this season, I would be surprised if he even come back after this season. Mike McCarthy, time for a change. I believe that they need to go after another coach, whether it's Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick, whoever it may be. But I just don't really feel like it was a good move to keep him in Dallas. I really felt like when you say that you're all in, but you keep the coach, that was strange, because you can't blame everything on him. I feel like a lot of the blame has to do with Jerry Jones for not even acquiring the pieces when he said he was all in. And now, not only that, he was looking back and saying, "Well, I didn't expect for us to be in this bad a shape this year. Maybe I miscalculated things." But a smart person would have said, at least if you don't really have a good run game to get Derrick Henry. I don't believe that'll fix all the problems. They have a lot of injuries and things that went on this year too. But I still believe that it would have been best for them to at least look into getting some pieces over there to help better the team. But since they didn't, it's not really much that I can say, honestly. Antonio Pierce, I believe his seat is hot too. They're not looking really good at all this year. They needed a quarterback and they couldn't get one in the draft. We already knew that it was surprising to us that Michael Penix Jr. ended up landing with the Atlanta Falcons, but that kind of snowballed the whole draft. But still, the guys that they had on the team wasn't really worth talking about, too. No disrespect at Uncle Rico, Gardner Minshew, and his backup. And I also want to talk about some of the things that went on, too, in the league. I want to recap some of the games that happened in the NFL. It's been pretty good this season. And I want to start off with the Texans and the New York Jets. Was really surprised on that Thursday night football game that they lost. Speaking of the Texans, I feel like the Texans are a really good team, and I thought that they'd do better against the Jets, who has been having issues all year. They didn't look so good going into this game. It was being booed at MetLife Stadium, but they picked up things, and I feel like Aaron Rodgers didn't really look too bad going into the second half. It was more or less, it was funny to me because it went from being booed to the fans actually having a little something to cheer about. He was 22 or 32 for 211 yards and 3 touchdowns on the day. And CJ Stroud didn't really do as good as I thought that he'd do. He was 11 for 30 for 191 yards and no touchdowns in that game. Joe Mixon was the workhorse in the game with 24 carries, 106 yards, and he had a touchdown. But it was just weird to me because it just let me know that not having Nico Collins really changed them and the complexity of that team. I just don't really feel like that they're as good of a team without him. I want to get into the Detroit Lions game versus Green Bay. I know that was a late game, but I wanted to get straight to the point. I really like this game. At first, I was like, man, I was a little nervous about it. I thought that they would win in a close one. Some people didn't have them winning at all, but I don't want to talk about that right now. But that's my co-host. I had to jab at him at that one. But it was a rainy situation and it was outside. A lot of people really looked at it like it was going to be a problem for us. But when I found out, unfortunately, that Jordan Love got hurt, I said, no, I want all their pieces healthy so it won't be no excuses. But he decided to play anyway. They felt like he was good enough to go. I said, okay, no problem. It is what it is. I want to see what happened. And you could clearly tell that he was hurt. So when I seen the game, I said, hey, we just had to do our jobs because I feel like on some of them fourth down plays, if we didn't convert the ones when we got the touchdowns and the first downs, it probably would have been a whole different game. But the game wasn't even really close as a 24-14 score. It showed we went in there and we put our foot on their throat, bottom line. Jared Goff was 18 to 22, 145 yards in the score. And David Montgomery had 17 carries with 73 yards. And Amon St. Brown had his 7 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Love was 23 of 39, and he had an interception on the day. And Josh Jacobs looked really good with 13 carries and 95 yards. And Reed, the wide receiver, looked pretty sharp as well over there for, the Green Bay Packers. Jaden Reed always looked good. To me, technically, I believe he's still their number one option. They're not saying and picking a person right now who's their number one, but clearly it's Jaden Reed or Romeo Dobbs. Now, the Bills in Miami game was actually pretty good, better than what I expected because when you see Tua Tagovailoa, he comes out and he comes out swinging, and he's been playing pretty good as of late. He come back and that lets you know that that was what they were missing, and they need him healthy more than they don't need him right now this season because everybody else from Tyler Huntley and whoever else the third string quarterback is terrible. So let's, put it at that. He was 25 or 28 for 231 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns on the day. And Devon A. Chain had 12 carries for 63 yards in the score. And Tyreek Hill, he looked pretty good on the day too. He didn't get in the end zone, but still, he had 4 receptions for 80 yards. But man, when I tell you how good Josh Allen's been looking this year, yeah, he had a pick, but he only have 2 interceptions on the season right now. And that's a guy who turns over the ball quite a lot. And for him to, kind of maintain that to 2 interceptions right now, this is one of the reasons he's in the MVP race. He was 25 to 39, 235 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he had that pick I talked about. James Cook didn't really do much with 10 carries and 44 yards, but Ray Davis really looked good. That was a kid who I liked, and he played for Kentucky, and I thought, man, he was pretty good, and I don't think that he got the recognition he deserved. But coming from there as a running back, he looked pretty sharp playing with the Bills, and he wasn't even really running the ball that much. He had 2 receptions, out the backfield for 70 yards in the score. So, yeah, the final score on that game was 30 to 27, and I apologize because I've said the other game final scores, but the Lions and Packers, by the way, that final score was 24-14, and I felt like those was like garbage points when they got to 14, but still it didn't matter because we went there on the road and we handled our business. The Denver Broncos versus the Ravens. I feel like when the Ravens slipped up last week, it was because of the fact that they was trying to go heavy on Lamar Jackson, and him throwing the ball. When you got a Ferrari or, something that's that beautiful and, you already gave him the keys to the franchise, you want to advertise and you want to put him out there and display him more. But I feel like that was a bad idea because when you have Derrick Henry and you can run the ball down team throat, and then you have different options. I feel like you should use them. They've been doing pretty good right now in the run game, and I just feel like they didn't do enough of that, to make the team honest, when they lost and surprisingly to the Cleveland Browns, on any given Sunday. But they made sure that they reassured themselves in their dominance of what they do best, and that's run the ball, either with Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry. And I believe they had a point to prove. Lamar Jackson was 16 to 19 for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Derrick Henry had 23 carries for 106 yards and 2 scores as well. And Zay Flowers is really starting to shape up as to being that wide receiver that they needed over there. He's starting to establish his trust, and he's really looking good over there with the Baltimore Ravens. He had 5 receptions for 127 yards and 2 scores. Cortland Sutton had 7 receptions for 122 yards, didn't see the end zone, and Javonte Williams had 12 carries for 42 yards and no score. But on the day, you could tell when you rattled Bo Nix, and Bo Nix looked definitely like a rookie. He had 19 for 33 in the air with 223 yards, and he had an interception on the day. I just feel like it was too much of Baltimore, what they did out there to just straight up dominate that team. It was 41-10. So, they were feeling some kind of way after losing to the Browns. Back to reality. The LA Chargers versus the Cleveland Browns. Justin Hubbard was sharp that game, and they're 5-3, and wherever Jim Harbaugh go, it just seems like he put his stamp on it. They don't really have a really sharp wide receiving core, and I apologize because I've said Quentin Johnson was a bust, but he's been looking really good this year. So my apology, and I just feel like with the stats it showed as well. Justin Herbert was 18 for 27 for 282 yards and 2 touchdowns. And J.K. Dobbins had 14 carries for 85 yards and 2 scores. And like I said, Quentin Johnston, he had 4 receptions for 118 yards and a touchdown. That's how we knew that there was a lot of problems over there with Cleveland. And that's the reason why I believe that we acquired Zadarius Smith, because after they lost that game, I believe they should have put him out at the half as bad as they was getting beat. Jameis Winston, he basically came back to reality after having a really huge game against the Ravens. He was 26 of 46 for 235 yards, a touchdown, and he had a whopping 3 interceptions. Nick Chubb didn't do much on the ground, neither. 15 carries, 39 yards. And I feel like the main person who did anything over there was the wide receiver. And I feel like Cedric Tillman looked really sharp in the game. He had 6 receptions for 75 yards, and he had a score, and that final score was 27-10. This is the reason why Dennis Allen was fired right here. Chuba Hubbard, and got to give credit to the Carolina Panthers because, like you say, on any given Sunday. But I believe after having such a huge first 2 games and scoring over 90 points those 2 games, and to lose 7 straight, especially to, like I said, a team like the Carolina Panthers. Derek Carr's definitely not helping. He's really not the answer at quarterback. And I think they need to look in another direction as well, even though he was hurt when a lot of this happened. But I still don't feel like he is the answer in, New Orleans, and they need to look after them a future franchise quarterback. He was 18 of 31 for 236 yards, and then he had an interception as well. Alvin Kamara had 29 carries for 155 yards, and he had 6 receptions for 60 yards. So he basically carried the team on his back. Bryce Young, on the other hand, was 16 of 26, 171 yards, a touchdown, and he had a pick on the day. But like I said, Chuba Hubbard ran crazy. He had 15 carries, 72 yards, and 2 scores on the day. And I feel like, that being said, that's the reason why I believe that they won, because they seemed like they just never quit. And Jatavion Sanders, the wide receiver, had an okay game too. He had 4 receptions for 87 yards. But that final score was 23-22. They went in and they ended up getting a drive that took them to the point to where they ended up, leading in the game. Chuba Hubbard gave them that game-leading drive that made it 23-22. They still had a chance to try to come down and pull the game out via a field goal or a touchdown, and they just couldn't convert and do anything. So, yeah, after losing 7 games in a row, it was time for something new over there in New Orleans, because when you have guys like Jordan Cameron and, Teron Matthew, and like different guys, Alvin Kamara, out there apologizing to the organization on how poor they've been playing and how they just didn't get the job done. That just lets you know that Dennis Allen lost the locker room and it was time to move on. That final score, like I said, was 22-23 Panthers. This was the game that surprised me, and this is why I feel like the Bengals are keeping pieces and they're buyers, not sellers. But Joe Burrow had a really solid game. He was 27 of 39, 251 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He had a pick, but them 5 touchdowns made up for it. Chase Brown had 27 carries for 120 yards, And Mike Gesicki, he definitely was the player of the day. He had 5 receptions for 100 yards and he had 2 scores. Gardner Minshew, like I said, Uncle Rico is not the answer, and it's time for them to definitely try to get someone in the draft. Hopefully, they could get someone with their pick because it's going to be high. He was 10 to 17 for 124 yards, and Alexander Madison didn't do anything. He was non-existent. He had 9 carries for 36 yards, but Jacoby Meyer had 8 receptions for 105 yards. He's the number one over there now, and it's sad because I feel like that team deserves better in that franchise. But until then, I unfortunately feel like Antonio Pierce will be on the outside looking in at the end of the season. I would be surprised if they keep him. A lot of it's not his fault, but hopefully they can keep that man around to change that organization and the culture. The final score was 24 to 41 to Cincinnati Bengals. That's why I was surprised that they didn't try to get rid of Max Crosby. But then I understand that's your franchise. That's basically all you really have to put butts in the seat. So, hey, we just have to figure out what we was going to do in a different fashion. I feel happy too because we would have gave up too much for him. And the good thing is, not only did we not have to do that, but then we still keep a lot of our pieces as well. I just seen some more news that I wanted to get to. The Steelers trade for the Jets wide receiver. Mike Williams is heading to Pittsburgh for a 5th-round pick. Congratulations, because I feel like they definitely needed another wide receiver over there. And I feel like right now, the way the Pittsburgh Steelers are playing, they're still just chugging along. They're definitely going to make the playoffs. And they got another big target besides Jordan Pickens. So, yeah, that was a really good pickup for them. This was a crazy game right here because I feel like the Giants gave Washington their all and they still lost. It was a sloppy game because I feel like Jaden Daniels, I thought that he'd have a better game against the Giants, but you got to give credit where credit is due because Daniel Jones has been looking sharp and the defense has been playing lights out. Daniel Jones he was 20 for 26, 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the other end, Jaden Daniels was 15 to 22, 209 yards and 2 scores as well. It wasn't really much going on in this game. I just feel like Jaden Daniels just had a better team, and that's what cost them to win this game. But yeah, Daniel Jones hasn't been looking really bad at all. He just don't really have much to work with, besides Malik Neighbors. And I feel bad because I still feel like that might not be an excuse for him. And I feel like they might just consider either trading him or getting rid of him and trying to move on and trying to find their future in this year's draft. I don't really feel like it's a quarterback heavy draft. So I might just wait a second before I make any moves materialize. But that final score was 27 to 22. And the Commanders moved on and won that game. Now, in this Dallas Cowboys game against the Falcons, it was really weird because the game was pretty much close. But when Dak Prescott got hurt, we didn't know how bad it was going to be. And now we know that he's going to be on IR. So that's 4 games that he'll be out. He was 18 to 24, 133 yards and a touchdown. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, was 19 to 24, 222 yards, and he had 3 scores. Really good game, and I feel like right now Atlanta Falcons are trending in the right direction. They're 6-3, and I feel like they're going to be a force to be working with, especially after the Buccaneers situation, and I will get to that eventually. This was a toilet bowl right here, the battle of the toilet teams, no disrespect. New England Patriots and the Tennessee Titans. I feel like New England had a chance, but they still couldn't pull it off. That final score was 17 to 20. Mason Rudolph had 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. And Drake May didn't really look too bad. He was 29 to 41, 206 yards. He had a touchdown, but he also had 2 picks as well. He's just a rookie trying to make his way. And unfortunately, he don't really have much to work with because New England is not really a good team either. Between them and the Panthers, I feel like they will be getting the number 1 overall pick. Bears and the Cardinals games kind of surprised me after how the Bears lost on that Hail Mary play, and then they ended up, I felt like this was going to probably be a rebound game. But the Cardinals, you never know what team you're going to get. They've been so Jekyll and Hyde this year, and it was just a really, crazy blowout victory. It was 29-9. Kyler Murray didn't even really do much. He was 13 to 20 for 154 yards, and James Conner had 18 carries for 107 yards. And even Trey McBride didn't do much, three receptions for like 35 yards. Caleb Williams was 22 of 41 for 217 yards, but Roma Duze looked pretty sharp. He had five receptions for 104 yards, but it still didn't materialize into a win for that team. So I feel like the struggles are starting to begin, and Eberflus' job is on the line. Right now, they're a 500 team, and I just want to see how it surfaces at the end of the year. Like I said, the final score was 29-9. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Philadelphia Eagles. This was a crazy game because the Eagles was up by a lot, and we talk about the spectacular play that Saquon Barkley made, the backwards hurdle. But it's still issues there. Yes, Saquon Barkley, he shined and he looked really good doing it. But you still let the Jacksonville Jaguars get into this game, and that would have been another story if they would have let the Jacksonville Jaguars win, because everybody already won Nick Sirianni's head. And I believe that if they don't at least get to the NFC championship game, that he might be out. Trevor Lawrence he was 16 to 31, 139 yards. I mean 169, but he had those two picks on the day. And Jalen Hurts didn't look too spectacular neither. He was 18 to 24, 230 yards through the air with two touchdowns. Saquon Barkley had 27 carries for 159 yards in the score, and Devontae Smith had four receptions for 87 yards, and he had a really good one-hand touchdown on the day. 23-28, and the Eagles survive, and they get to keep their coach for the time being. One of the good games to me was the Rams and the Seahawks. The Seahawks tied that game up and took it into overtime. But Matthew Stafford to Robinson was a really good play. Robinson, I thought that was a really good catch that he did. It was just right there for him to catch it. On reliable Matthew Stafford still making things happen. And I believe that if they could keep it up and they're a 500 team, 4-4, they possibly be able to make the playoffs. He had 298 yards through the air with two touchdowns and an interception. Geno Smith was 21 to 34 with 236 yards, and he had three touchdowns but three picks on the day as well. But it was a really good contested game. Cooper Kupp had 11 receptions for 104 yards, but Jackson Smith and Jigba is definitely starting to, make things look pretty easy over there with the Seahawks. He had 7 receptions for 180 yards, and he had 2 scores on the game. So he really looked sharp. Right now, they're not really missing the DK Metcalf. I feel like this year, the Jackson Smith and Jigba really took over the number 2 wideout position. I want to know, and I was hearing little speculations and little rumors about DK Metcalf, because people were calling about him because how well Jackson Smith and Jigba did. But they said, of course, that's not going to happen. They'd rather keep the 3 until they can anymore before they let DK go. That final score in overtime was 26 to 20, the Los Angeles Rams. The Colts and the Vikings game wasn't too bad, but it's funny because how well Joe Flacco has been playing, but he definitely looked every bit of 39. He didn't really play as good as he normally do. He was 16 to 27 for 179 yards and touchdowns, but it wasn't really a good day for him. Sam Darnold didn't really look that good neither. He had just enough to win. I feel like he had 290 yards, 3 scores, but he had 2 picks as well. But Justin Jefferson really got off. He didn't get in the end zone, but he had 7 receptions for 137 yards. But I just feel like The talent of Minnesota, offense and defensively, was just too much for what's going on over there with the Indianapolis Colts. And I was saying myself, I still don't feel like with Joe Flacco that they will have a chance to make it to the playoffs. Now they're game under 500, and I want to see how Flacco played through the rest of the season. But at the end of the day, he's going to have to tighten up if they're going to make a run. But I still don't feel like it's going to happen. And I feel like Anthony Richardson, if you got him as a high, draft pick, fourth overall, you need to do something with him right now. Because 21-13 barely got them by. But it looked like at one point they possibly could have slipped and lost another game. Minnesota, that is. Okay, I want to get to the game now, the Monday night football game, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was a really good one. Tampa Bay is a game under 500, and that's why I feel like when I was saying Atlanta Falcons was trending in the right direction because, yeah, it's unfortunate they just had to face, Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. I felt like this game, I felt like the Bucks can get an upset. It was in overtime, and I have to still say Baker Mayfield didn't get that opportunity. I still felt like they should have went for two. They missing Mike Edwards. Mike Edwards. They're missing Mike Evans, and they're missing Chris Godwin. So by them missing those two guys, they're already to the point where I didn't really feel like they was going to have a really good chance. But their defense was playing really good. They was getting to Patrick Mahomes, and they looked really solid. I would have went for two because you're in a hostile environment in Kansas City, and I feel like that would have been the best chance for you guys to stun them. But they didn't want to do that. They took it to overtime, and I believe Todd Bowles took the risk in saying he wanted to go ahead and he wanted to make sure that his team had an opportunity, but he wanted to give the defense a chance to let them know he trusted defense. But you can't mess with Patrick Mahomes and his magic in overtime. They took it all the way down the length of the field and won it at the end. That final score was 30-24. Patrick Mahomes had 291 yards in the air with 3 touchdowns, and Baker Mayfield looked pretty good too. He had 200 yards and 2 scores. And Cade Otton definitely was the hot hand. He had 8 receptions, 77 yards and a touchdown. And Travis Kelce had 14 receptions for 100 yards. Kareem Hunt looked pretty good too. He had 27 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah Pacheco should be back pretty soon too. So it's really going to be interesting how they utilize both of those guys and what's going to happen coming into the season, because the more healthier they're getting, the more they're trending in the right direction. And DeAndre Hopkins looked really solid that game, and he hasn't been there that long. But then I've been hearing he said he'd be there soon as everybody get there in the morning and be one of the last ones to leave, to just try to focus on, executing that offense and doing what he need to do. So good for him. He's always been a perfectionist. I want to get into a little bit of stats before I leave. I haven't really seen anything else yet as far as what's going on around the league. The last thing was that Steelers getting Mike Williams, which I thought that was a really good pickup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But after looking at that Detroit Lions game versus the Green Bay Packers, I found some pretty interesting stats. Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown, they haven't had an incompletion since September. And they're 30 for 30 right now. So he's 30 for 30 for throwing to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Derrick Henry is the first running back in the league to basically have all the categories. He's first in every category. And that's the first time in 1963 that stat been accomplished from a running back. Rush attempts, he have 161, and that's first. Rushing yards, he's 1,021 yards, first. Yards in rush, that's 6.3 per carry, first, of course. And rushing touchdowns, he have 11. And that was the first time anybody led in all 4 categories since 1963, of course, with Jim Brown. And so far, so good. I haven't really seen too much going on and what's happening around the league as far as any more late breaking news. So I would keep you posted with that. But for now, I'm going to go back on the Sports Guru to you, and that's my Facebook page to give all that information. And I'm about to sit back, relax, and see how everything unfold right now. And once again, just want to let you guys know that you can reach me at Hoovy on Instagram. That's where I put all my stats as far as my highlight reel stats. I got all my highlight reels and all the stuff that you need to entertain you from the NBA, NFL, MLB, etc. WNBA, you name it. And on TikTok, I'm Hugh.Lee6, the same thing. I put all my stats from the NFL, NBA, WNBA, etc. Sports Guru to You is my Facebook page where I put all my late breaking news, like now with the trade deadline and anything that's going around in the NBA, MLB, whatever sport, long as it's some good news or breaking news, I'm on it. You can catch up with me if you want me to talk about anything else as far as sports that you feel like I'm leaving behind, or things you want me to talk about and express and get more in depth with on my email. And my email is sportsguru2you@gmail.com. Right now, you're listening to the Guru Perspective. I come on every Tuesday at 1 p.m. And then on Wednesdays, I do the Guru Sports Session. And that comes on at 9 p.m. Thank you for chiming in. Appreciate you as always. And peace until the next episode. See you soon.